Good day. Good day, and welcome to another episode of Throwing It Back with Sean Farrell. I am Sean Farrell. God is great all the time. All the time, God is great. And let's not waste no time. Let's get right to it. Okay. So, gonna be doing a couple of videos on the Phoenix Suns. So I just want to start off by talking about the 92-93 Suns and the Suns teams after that. So the 93 Suns had the best record in the league in 1993. And 62-20. Advanced all the way to the NBA Finals, where they lost to the Chicago Bulls in 6. And one of the real key contributors on that team was a guy by the name of Richard Dumas. Okay. And so, Richard Dumas was drafted in the second round in 1991 by Phoenix, but he failed a drug test. Okay. He failed a drug test and he ended up missing the entire season. His entire rookie season of 91-92. And so, he also been kicked off the team in Oklahoma while he was at Oklahoma. Okay, and he played overseas. Also played in the CBA. And so it was the 1993 season, and it was actually Paul Westphal and Cotton Fitzsimmons, if memory serves me correct. No, it was Paul Westphal and assistant coach Lionel Hollins at that time, who went to bat for Richard Dumas, and they convinced Jerry Colangelo to sign him. So Dumas was signed. He averaged 15.1 points in his rookie season. I mentioned the other day how Paul Westphal wasn't playing him in late game situations because he gambled a lot defensively. And so he had his moments in his rookie season. He had a good rookie season. But as I mentioned in the previous videos before, that he got benched for Tom Chambers in Game 7 of the Western Conference semifinals. Chambers played most of the game, but Richard Dumas didn't get off the bench for that 7th game. Paul Westphal benched him. And so he had a good hit series against Chicago. And so in the process of having a good series against the Chicago Bulls, reports began to come out of Chicago during that series that Richard Dumas was drinking by himself at a bar near the team's hotel. Okay. And Richard Dumas would admit that he didn't like loud noises. He didn't like crowds. He didn't like that kind of stuff. And what he would do to relax himself was he would have like a 6-pack before the game. So he would drink before every game, which is how he got relaxed to go out and play the game. Okay. And so he failed another drug test before the 94 season and was kicked out again for a whole year. And which may have been the main reason why behind the reason that the Phoenix Suns signed AC Green during the off season, which is the jersey that I have on now. So the Phoenix Suns were offsetting the suspension of Richard Dumas by signing AC Green to take his spot. Okay. So, and I remember Charles Barkley said this in a interview. He said, after the 1993 series loss against the Bulls, Charles Barkley said he knew that they weren't going back. The Suns were never going back to the NBA Finals because they had lost the NBA Finals, and Charles Barkley said there were guys on that team that started thinking they should get paid more. They should get paid more. Guys who were on the bench started thinking they should get paid more. Guys were opening up restaurants and whatnot. So then Charles Barkley was talking about it on NBA Open Court, and Reggie Miller said, "What players will open up restaurants?" And Charles Barkley was like, "I'm not gonna say them names." He said, Reggie Miller said, "No. We want names." Reggie Miller was like, "We want names. Who was opening up restaurants? Who was writing books?" And the only name that Charles Barkley gave was Dan Arley, who I think his restaurant is still operating in Phoenix today, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. So Dan Marley was the only one who had a successful restaurant. Okay. And then Ernie Johnson asked him a sarcastic question. He said, by the way, Charles, how did your restaurant do? So then Charles Barkley went like, "I've never opened up a restaurant, Ernie." Yeah, so, but yeah, so the Suns signed AC Green to offset the Dumas loss, and they pretty much brought back the same team for 1994. Virtually everybody came back. The only new faces on there were AC. There was a guy by the name of Malcolm Mackey they drafted, and they signed a guy named Dwayne Cooper, and had a guy named Joe Courtney, and a guy who signed with them later in the season by the name of Skeeter Henry. Okay. Yeah, so out of all those new faces, I say AC Green made the most impact because, AC Green was the Iron Man at that time. So, AC Green, out of all the new faces, had the most impact. Had his career high of 35 points and 14 rebounds against the Kings that season. Suns went 56 and 26. Lost to Houston in the second round. Then most of the core comes back for 1995. But they had made a couple of transactions. They traded Cedric Ceballos to the Lakers. Okay. And there was a incident at a party that Cedric Ceballos threw after the playoffs. Okay. And I was reading in a book that Cedric Ceballos threw a party so wild that Oliver Miller was traded for his part in it. And so while thinking of his topic, I thought about that, and I said, well, let me go see the part that Oliver Miller played that got him traded. Okay. Well, there was a woman at that party who accused Oliver Miller of forcing her to have sex with Oliver Miller. Okay. So that was the thing that got Oliver Miller traded, along with Mark West, to the Detroit Pistons. Okay. And so Ceballos is in LA, Miller and the West are in Detroit, and they had like 7 new faces on the roster for 1995. Of course, the main core was still there: KJ, Barkley, Marley, Ainge, and so the core was still there. Okay, and you still had Paul Westphal as coach, but For 1995, they added Antonio Lang, Danny Manning, Wesley Person, Trevor Ruffin, Aaron Swenson, and Wayman Tisdale. Okay, so you had all these new faces along with the championship core from a few years ago. And I forgot the Suns also had Elliot Perry in 1994. Okay, so Elliot Perry came to the team later in the season in 1994. So we also had Elliot Perry as well. And so they went 59 and 23. And Dumas actually returned later in that season. He returned in March, but he only played like in 12 games, really didn't see action in the NBA playoffs. Then he failed another drug test after the season, and the Suns released him. And then he signed with Philadelphia, played 39 games for the 76ers, and then was out of basketball altogether. So, this is what Charles Barkley meant when he said he knew Phoenix wasn't going back to the NBA Finals for the rest of his time there. And he brought this up on the episode of NBA Open Court where Charles Barkley said he doesn't believe in best players because they were doing the segment on the best players who never made it. The segment was called Best Players Who Never Made It. And they went to Charles Barkley first and he said, Charles, has there ever been a player that fits that version for you? So then Charles was like, I don't believe that. Charles said, what's difficult for me, and probably these guys here, he was talking about the rest of the panel. He said, there were a couple of guys because of drugs, alcohol, attitude, never made it. Okay. And you see some guys that you're like, man, if he works hard, he matures and he grows up, he's going to be a star in this league. But they never grow up. And I immediately thought of Richard Dumas when he was saying that. Okay. Because Barkley says that Richard Dumas is not a bad guy. He's a good guy to be around. But hey. So the core of the the start of the 93 Suns that went to the NBA Finals can actually be traced back to 1988 when the Phoenix Suns pulled off a trade for KJ, Mark West, and Tyrone Corbin. And the Cavaliers received Larry Nance in return. Okay. And see, here's the interesting part about that. Okay. The Cleveland Cavaliers were set to play the Phoenix Suns in Phoenix hours before the trade happened. Okay. Ironically, the Cavaliers were playing the Suns in Phoenix